Highlights of the second edition of the Global Fintech Fest, which is off in Mumbai today. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman inaugurated the event, praising the fintech space for driving financial inclusion in the country. The who's who of banking and finance converging at this three-day-long summit to discuss the steps that must be taken to build a responsible fintech ecosystem. Now, as the event kicked off, a report by the Boston Consulting Group expects global fintech revenue to touch $1.5 trillion by 2030. It also expects Asia-Pacific to become the world's top fintech market in 7 years. Well, joining me now to discuss the takeaways and insights from the report from the Global Fintech Summit is Neeraj Aggarwal, Managing Director and Senior Partner at BCG. Neeraj, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC-TV18. Let me start by asking you about the highlights of that report, which has been released today to mark the inaugural session of the Global Fintech Summit. We've made strides as a nation when it comes to fintech. We've, of course, seen the kind of success that the UPI has met with. But what will it take for India to truly become a fintech nation? What's the report suggesting in terms of insights on the next steps?
Look, Shireen, firstly, always a pleasure to talk to you and great to be on this channel with you. This is a really special moment. I think the Indian Fintech Center, to my mind, started around the 2008-9 timeframe. It's been 15 years, and look how far we have come. The energy in the room here is palpable, right? And the number of people who are part of this revolution is insane. What we've created in India is a stack architecture, which started in the original years with the Aadhaar and the UPI layer, and there is so much innovation happening upstack now with so many companies. What I am particularly energized by is in the fintech space, what India and as a result of that Asia more broadly is doing is creating a playbook which I think will play out in many, many more sectors in times to come. Let me exemplify that. As you rightly said, the industry becomes $1.5 trillion, 600 billion will come out of Asia, and by 2030 the size of the fintech industry in Asia will be bigger than the size of the industry in North America. This actually is, while it may seem like a small step, it's actually a big moment. It has not happened in any other sector where we start transcending North America on some of the innovative stuff in not so distant future. And the reason I call this out is because this is a unique playbook which has been crafted largely in this part of the world where India has been at the forefront and Asia more broadly so, as well as this is something which is truly, truly driven out of our own necessity. I often say you have to be a part of the problem to be a part of the solution, and this exemplifies that. So I'm very excited about the possibilities, and we are happy to talk more about it.
Yes, absolutely, and we're looking forward to all the action. Of course, you're joining us from our vantage point at the Global Fintech Summit, where CNBC-TV18 is positioned, and we'll be bringing you all the action live from there. But Neeraj, let's talk about some of the India-specific innovations. UPI, as I pointed out, has been one big one. We are now talking about UPI going global as well. The finance minister was there talking about how fintechs collaborating with banks, etc., have done a lot for the cause of financial inclusion. As we talk about more collaboration, inking more partnerships, and also the other crucial aspect will be the profitability and sustainability of fintechs themselves. Is the roadmap clearer now for that?
So firstly, I want to tell you a small anecdote, Shireen. I was in Jakarta on Sunday morning in a ASEAN breakfast. There were about 50 plus CEOs and senior leaders who were there in the room. And, while there were many things being debated, there was one CEO who stood up and said, I want to share one interesting story. And he said, look, I have just come back from a 9-day study tour of Bangalore. And this thing called UPI is setting the whole world on fire. And we need to learn from that and embrace it in Indonesia. And he said it is inclusive, it is frugal, it's best in class, everything that we know about it. But, and I was sitting there and my heart was pumping with pride. Because that's the kind of story you want to hear. And that shows you the potential this thing has unleashed, not just in India, but the admiration it is creating all across the world. But that being said, innovation is never a linear path. That means there will be, sometimes you go 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. And that will happen in this space as well. But overall, the direction of travel and the momentum that we're carrying, I think is incredible. And I'm super positive about the future. Yes, you talked about sustainability and profitability. I think we've crossed the Rubicon on that in many ways, and I feel a lot more positive about as I look forward on this.
Yes, there is a lot to look forward to, and of course, plenty of excitement there, Neeraj, as far as UPI is concerned. But let's talk about the regulatory framework as well. And while we have seen the Reserve Bank do its part in order to facilitate the growth and enable the growth of this sector, what more do you believe needs to be done from a regulatory point of view?
Look, I think firstly, I want to compliment the regulators. They have been very far-reaching. They've been very, I think not only is the architecture open stack and it allows you to build on top of that, it is resilient, it's secure. So I think all of those are fundamental ingredients to embody the success. So I think that's great. That being said, there is always constant need to keep innovation. I'm very excited to see RBI set up a big innovation stall here, right below the CNBC booth where I'm sitting, and it's big and it's talking about digital currency and other areas of innovation. So you have to be, innovation is, as I said earlier, not a linear process. So the ability to let a few hundred flowers bloom, sometimes more than that, and let the right ones succeed is super critical, and I see that mindset. That being said, I think we need to continue to attract great funding. This sector will need to be able to recognize its potential, more and more pools of capital. The report calls out finding newer source of funding to be able to embody that and to be able to support that. And I think that's something which needs to be on the work. And we need to create more than just the financial regulator, more broadly an enabling framework, whether it's the sovereign wealth fund or other things which also will help this, in my mind.
Neeraj, before I let you go, you talked about funding. We are in the midst of a funding winter at this point in time on account of the global macroeconomic headwinds. What's the expectation from here on? Do you believe that the worst is perhaps behind us?
So I think it's a good, if you use a metaphor of the winter, I think 22 was really the winter. I think 23, I'm seeing a bit of a thawing happening, if I may use that metaphor further. So there are signs of opening up. I feel the early stage funding for innovative ideas is there. The challenge is more in the mid to the late stage funding, where sometimes the valuation mismatch and the expectations from the heightened 2021 period are wrongly set in the minds of the two stakeholders, the funders and the people seeking funding. And I think there we need to, as I said earlier itself, we need to create more sources of funding. We also need to moderate expectations. I feel it will take a little more time to settle down. We didn't touch upon Gen AI and the possibilities it creates. I think that may unleash a new wave of productivity. And that itself, when I talk to the funders, is creating a new wave of excitement, because the possibilities on pervasive productivity, on reset of the operating model unleashes a possibility which are exciting all and sundry, right? I mean, I think it can push a new productivity, which I think, as you know, the funders like when you're flipping the odds and you're creating new ways of creating success. So that drives me even more positive about it.
All right, Neeraj, well, we will continue to track all the action at the Global FinTech Summit. But thanks very much for joining us today as the summit kicked off and giving us a quick snapshot of what the report that's been released today says and what we have to look forward to. We will head into a break, but up next, all